Welcome to Healing the Trauma Within. In this session, I'm speaking with Santeresa Wilson about how to survive the healing process. Before we dive in, let me tell you a little bit about Santeresa. She is a New Jersey native and CEO of Inspired by You LLC. She empowers people to become better versions of themselves wholly. With speaking engagements across the US and abroad, in Canada and UK, she spreads a message of hope and survival. She has a bachelor's degree in divinity and has served as a sexual assault response team volunteer advocate with the New Jersey Rape Crisis Center. She is a certified trauma recovery coach, helping those who feel stuck in life make their vision become reality. This former teen mother's survival of divorce, domestic violence, sexual assault, homelessness, and more has led her to write her debut manual of emotional freedom, Releasing My Secret, a 30-day devotional to supporting your healing process. Santeresa's goal in life is to remind people that they can heal and begin again. So welcome, Santeresa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Tracy.
I'm thrilled to have you here. The healing process is such a huge journey, and it is so emotional that there is times where you just wonder, am I going to make it through this?
Yeah.
So how do we go about even just starting the healing process?
And that's the key. I believe in order to heal, you have to start. A lot of times, a lot of us survivors, because I'm a survivor as well, as you know, you read in my bio, a lot of times we tend to survive the trauma. We tend to survive what we've gone through, but a lot of people, they don't like to endure the healing process because, again, it can be very emotional. You know, your emotions can be very wide and very broad, and some days you're happy, some days you're sad. And so the thing is just to start and also realize that the journey, you cannot do the journey by yourself.
That is absolutely true. Oh my gosh, I know, because I've tried. It didn't work so well. Didn't work so well. I was one of those that, I can handle this. I don't need help. I can tough it out. I'm fine, And 20, 30 years down the road, it's like, oh my gosh, somebody throw me a lifeline.
And I say that very frequently when I speak. I say a lot of times that society teaches us to move forward, move past, keep going, push forward. And so we can't do that, we have to learn that self-care is essential, because what happens is all we do is we bury and we suppress. And so we'll notice years later that there's a spillover, that things in our lives just aren't as they should be, as we think that they should be. We notice that we have a lot of red flags, which I call triggers. I call triggers red flags. And so you'll notice that, somebody could do something and that they didn't mean it, but the offense that we carry because we haven't dealt with the past trauma is so broad and so severe. And so it's essential for us to be able to move forward and to be able to start the process and to heal.
Oh, yes. It's, and I'm one of those, I teach people to move past their past, but in order to move past your past, you have to accept it and you have to work through it. You can't just forget that it happened or pretend that it didn't happen. But when these emotions and these triggers and stuff come up for us, they get so intense sometimes. How do you get your clients through those intense times?
So I am, I'm a trauma recovery coach. I coach everyone, but I stand in a place of being faith-based. And so for me, what I encourage them, and I let them know that it's okay not to be okay, right? It's okay to say, today is not a good day, because sometimes people feel like I shouldn't say this. I'm in leadership. I'm in this position. I have children. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I can't not be okay. And so for me, a lot of people out there in Christendom, we read the Bible. Some people who aren't in Christendom, they read the Bible. And so what I've learned in my journey of healing is that even in the Bible, it says Jesus wept, which is the shortest scripture in the Bible, right? He had a friend, his friend died while he was out taking care of things he needed to take care of. When his friend died, the Bible says that he stopped and he cried. And then after he processed his emotions of grief, after he processed his emotions of sorrow, then he proceeded to move past that and to do what he was here to do, right? And so I tell my clients it's okay to have those moments where you have to stop, and sometimes your stop doesn't have an exact limit on it. And what I mean by that is stop and process your emotions. And I can't tell you that your stop is for one day. Last year when I lost my father to COVID, I stopped for a few months to make sure that my self-care was okay, because how can I coach, or how can I help someone else? How can I be a good mom if I'm not okay? So when my clients are going through something, let's process this. Let's do some strategies. Let's see if this is a moment where you need to stop and reflect and take a step back and readjust things so that you can get through the process. Again, the thing is to get you through the process, but we don't want to rush the process.
Well, first, I'm very sorry about your father.
Thank you.
And I did the same thing when my husband died. I stopped. I mean, I had no choice. My world stopped, but I just allowed it to happen. I allowed the grieving to happen. I didn't try to stifle it. If I had moments where I needed to just sob for 5 minutes, I sobbed for 5 minutes and wiped my nose, and I was good to go. And it's been 2 years, and I still have those moments, and I might cry for 2 or 3 minutes, or just have a couple of tears, or I might just feel sad. And I just allow those emotions to happen, because otherwise they just build up in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what, when we get into that healing process and we're thinking, I'm not going to make it through this, how do we get through it? How do we just continue the process? Because it's a lifelong process.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is that you are going to make it, right? You are going to make it. In that moment, we feel as if we're not, but you still have breath in your body, right? And I know a lot of people say that, but that's key. That means that you still have purpose. That means that you still have pushing, you still have something that lies ahead. And that's why we're still here. And so when you get to that moment, it's just about, when you come through this, the amount of people that you'll be able to help, because a lot of times we feel like I'm just going through this for myself. But I truly believe that we're all helpers of one another. We're created to be codependent upon one another. And so in that, when I come out of this, I'll be able to help somebody else out. You're strong enough to endure that, right? And so again, the key thing is when you're going through and you feel like give up, get you a song, get you a motivational quote, get you something, call someone who's going to lift your spirits at that moment. Again, you cannot do this process, the healing process, by yourself.
What kind of a support system do people need in order to get through the healing process? I mean, obviously we need like a therapist, and we need, or a coach or something like that, but who else do we need on our team?
You need someone who you can trust, someone who's not judgmental, but someone who is very, very authentic when it comes to you, someone who you could be your authentic self with. Because a lot of times we mask ourselves and we put the mask on of everything's okay. And so because we mask it, that causes suppression of our feelings. So yes, a therapist, a coach, a great support team, a close friend, someone who you can say, okay, I trust this person to where I can be my authentic self, to where I could cry, but then they can push me along and say, all right, come on, let's go. I got you. Let's go. I'll push you along. And so it's just having that support system around who you can authentically trust. And even, if you have a coach, make sure it's a coach or a mentor, a therapist that you trust. Every mentor and every therapist and every coach is not a good fit for everyone. And I have to say that because some people get stuck in situations and they pay money in situations and they're miserable. And, I say that I have a coach. And after I lost my father, I lost a baby. But while I was carrying, I was in and out the hospital. And when I contacted my business coach, he was on the phone sending me motivational things and YouTube video clips and things like that to lift me up. And it wasn't about the money, it was more about, I want to make sure you're okay. So you have to make sure that whoever's standing by your side is a good fit.
And for those who are listening who maybe are that person for somebody else, how do we really be that person for somebody? Because something that I have found is that as a trauma coach myself, I like to focus on the traumas that I've been through because I get it, you know.
Mhm.
But those people who are on our support team who haven't necessarily been through that, you know, they may say or do something that they think is well-meaning, but it's actually detrimental. So for those people, how can we, or how can they best support somebody?
I would say be a listening ear. The main thing is that when someone goes through trauma, they lose their power, they lose their voice, they lose that sense of independency of their life. And so a lot of times when people approach people, they always say what you should have, could have, would have done, if you were in that situation, not being able to walk in that. You've never walked in that situation. So even though assumption would tell you that, oh, you should have called the police, oh, you should have reported, oh, you should have walked away, oh, you should have left. When you're actually in that situation, it's not as easy as it sounds. And so everybody goes through that. So when you approach someone or you want to be that support, I would say allow for that person to talk and allow for them to, and just put yourself in a pre-coaching mode, right? And allow for them to talk, allow for them to come up with strategies. If they say they want to do something, they say they want to go to a doctor, they want to go to a counselor. Okay, do you want me to come with you? Do you want me to drive you? Do you want me to be that support? All they're needing is support at that moment, because again, you don't want to say something that would be detrimental to that person because you're speaking from a place of not knowing.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Having that listening ear is crucial. And it's not that we come to you because we want you to fix us or to fix it. We just need to vent.
Yes.
I know when I lost Mark, I joined a couple of widow support groups, and they were detrimental to my healing. They were so important to me because I could go in there and I could whine and moan and groan and just, oh, woe is me. And they got it, in those first few weeks when I was still in shock and trying to figure out what my life looked like now.
And sometimes we tell the same story over and over again. You just got to be able to listen, because when we're in that moment, like I want to because sometimes that's how people process. They just keep talking about it. And so you have to be willing to hear the same story over and over again. If something comes up that they missed out the first time, trauma will cause you to forget a detail about something. It doesn't mean that they're lying. It just means that trauma may have caused them to suppress it at the moment and they just remembered it. So again, just be that listening ear, because we tell the story, we'll tell it about 20 times and it might be 20 different new details that came in while we're telling the story.
So true. Oh my goodness. That is so true. Yeah, I've been telling stories and I'll be like, well, I just remembered that this,
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's a new memory that just popped up for me, because we suppress things to protect ourselves.
Yes.
And we have that trauma brain going on, which, is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for us. So what are some, I know we talked about just getting started, but what are some steps that people can take that, we could take away from this call on going through that healing process and making it through to the other side?
So first I want to say to admit and just be honest with yourself that there is trauma, because a lot of times people don't want to admit it. They want to feel like, oh, that's just life. And no, a traumatic event, the non-technical term behind it, I always say, is something that affects the normalcy of your life. So that could be anything. Anything could be traumatized. You could lose your job, your kids can move out, anything that's trauma, sexual assault, anything, right? Anything that causes a disturbance to your normalcy. But to admit that I've been traumatized by this, I am hurting in my emotions behind it. And so with anything, you have to admit that to yourself, right? And then when understand that you have to go, it's a process, right? And the process isn't a time frame on the process. It doesn't always happen within a week. It doesn't happen within a month. It could take years to happen. But the thing is to keep going, because if you stop in the middle, then you'll have to go back to where you first started at and get back through that part that you stopped at. And so the key is that the place where you find it most difficult, that's the time that you pick up the phone. That's the time that you call someone, you call your support system. That might be the moment where you say, hey, I've gotten through this much. I've admitted it. I've been trying to process through it. I've read books. I've gotten literature. But now it's time for me to get a coach. Now it's time for me to get a counselor. Now it's time for me to get someone to walk through this part of it, because it could be a little bit harder for you to handle it by yourself or process it by yourself.
Mhm.
The key thing is just to keep going, because it will come to a place to where you will be totally healed. Healing is something that's guaranteed. I truly believe that, he who the Son has set free is definitely free indeed. I believe that we all can walk in a freedom and a newness in our lives, and we don't have to carry the burden of trauma. I always say on a daily basis that healing doesn't mean that the trauma never existed. It just means that the trauma no longer controls our life.
Oh, I like that. I like that. And that's so true. Just because it doesn't affect us anymore doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk about my rape and there's no emotions attached to it anymore. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean it wasn't traumatic. It just means that I no longer tie the emotions to it because I have healed from it.
Yes.
But then on the other hand, I can talk about Mark dying and I'm still healing from that. It's, yes, it's been 2 years out. Yes, I'm in a new relationship, but I'm still healing. And I can talk about him and there's still emotion there because I'm not done with that process.
Yeah.
Like you said, it is a journey.
It is a journey.
Yeah, it's a journey that can take a very long time. And you have to have patience with yourself.
And you have to forgive yourself, because a lot of times we self-blame. We feel like there's something else that maybe I could have done, maybe I could have said. And I carried that when my mom passed away years ago, and I was over her affairs and to make a decision. And when I made the decision that I made, she passed away the following day. And so I carried that guilt. Like, I should have did something. Maybe she would have been here longer. Maybe I could have. But you have to learn to forgive yourself and understand that, things happen in life that we don't have control over everything. And so, learn to forgive yourself. Somebody might say, I don't hate myself, but when you hold yourself accountable for a decision that you've made, then there's some unforgiveness there. Sometimes you have to accept the decision that you've made, accept, whatever you're going through, and then be able to say, okay, now I can move past this point. You deserve forgiveness and you deserve to be free, despite what the outcome of the situation was.
Right. Yeah, I've done that too. I had to make the decision to end Mark's life support. And that was a tough call. And, for a long time it was, well, did I make the right decision? What if I hadn't? Would he have come back out of it? And I know deep down it was the right decision. But you still have that guilt and shame and all of that goes along with it. And so, for me, one of the first steps was having to forgive myself and just, love myself in that moment of having to make that tough choice, and knowing that I did the best that I could with the information that I had, Well, Santeresa, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on, talking
Thank
with
you
us
for having me, Trace.
about talking with us about going through this healing process, because it is such a process for sure. So this has been fantastic. Listeners, thank you for tuning into the summit. And we will definitely talk to you in one of the other sessions.
Yes, thank you. Take care.